You know, in real estate, we're kind of used to things moving at a steady, predictable pace. But every once in a while, a company comes along and just completely flips the script. Today, we're digging into the absolutely incredible story of LPT Realty. Let's get into it.
Okay, get ready for this number. Seriously. Between 2023 and 2024, LPPT Realty sales volume grew by almost 195%. Now, to put that into perspective, that is the single biggest jump among any of the top 100 brokerages in the entire country. It's just a wild number that makes you stop and ask, how?
And that leads us to the big question, right? How does a company that's pretty new to the scene become such a massive outlier? You don't just trip and fall into growing 50 times faster than the whole market. No way. There has to be a strategy, a system. So how in the world did LPT Realty pull it off?
All right, so here's how we're going to unpack this whole thing. First, we'll look at the sheer scale of this growth, the explosion itself. Then we'll get into the engine behind it all, their platform business model. After that, we'll break down exactly how they pay their agents, which is key. Then we'll cover their super smart acquisition strategy. And finally, we'll look ahead to see what's next for this absolute game changer of a company. Okay, first up, let's really wrap our heads around the scale of this thing. Because saying 195% growth is one thing, but seeing it is something else entirely. Wow, okay, this chart just says it all, doesn't it? You can see the overall market kind of chugging along with modest growth. And then you see LPT Realty. It's just a skyscraper. Their growth absolutely dwarfs their closest competitor. This is like they're not even in the same race anymore. They've lapped everybody. And the speed, it's just mind-blowing. The company literally launched in 2022. A couple of years later, they're hitting almost $14 billion in sales. By 2025, they're already in the top 10 biggest brokerages by number of deals done. Think about that. What takes most companies decades to build, they did in just a few years. It's wild.
So you're probably asking, what's the secret sauce here? How did they pull this off? Well, it all comes down to their business model. It's a totally different way of thinking about how to run a real estate company. It all comes down to this idea of a national brokerage platform. Basically, think of it less like a classic real estate office and more like a tech startup that happens to sell houses. It's all in the cloud, there are no expensive brick-and-mortar offices, and the whole thing is designed from day one to grow super fast without the crazy high costs.
And when you put the two models side by side, the difference is just night and day. The old school model is heavy. It's got all these physical offices, high fixed costs. The platform model is light and agile. It gets rid of all that overhead, uses tech to centralize everything, and totally shifts the goal from owning a local market to just recruiting great agents from everywhere. Okay, so if your entire model is built around recruiting tons of agents, you have to have a killer compensation plan, right? This is the fuel for that fire. It's how they get thousands of agents to join them.
So LPT offers agents a choice, which is smart. There's one plan with a really low $5,000 cap, which is great for agents who might have an up and down year. Then there's a plan for bigger producers with a $15,000 cap. But where it gets really interesting, and what applies to both, are the stock awards and especially their unique spin on revenue sharing.
And about that revenue sharing, it's not just a standard setup. They've baked in this really clever twist that's designed to keep their agents selling, not just recruiting. Okay, check this out. It's brilliant. When an agent earns money from the people they recruited, that cash doesn't just go into their bank account. First, it goes toward paying down their own annual cap. Only after their cap is totally paid off does that revenue share turn into direct income. It's such a smart way to make sure agents are focused on both recruiting and producing. But recruiting agents one by one is only part of the story. It's fast, but LPT figured out a way to grow even faster, in huge chunks, all at once. So, here's the puzzle. How on earth do you, as a relatively new company, go out and acquire a massive brokerage with over 1,000 agents and billions in sales?
And the real kicker, how do you do it without writing a check for millions and millions of dollars? This is where that platform model gets really powerful.
Well, this is where their genius really shines. They don't use cash. They have this non-cash acquisition toolkit. Instead of a buyout, they offer brokerage owners two things. First, a huge, ready-made revenue share team that starts making them money on day one. And second, they give them and their agents stock in the parent company. With an IPO planned, that's a pretty sweet deal. And this isn't just theory. They pulled it off with huge players like Big Block Realty and Realty Group. All right, so after all that explosive growth, what's next? You'd think they'd take a breather, right? Nope. They're already making some huge moves to expand their empire even further. So a few huge things are on the horizon. First up, the big one. They're planning to go public, which will bring in a ton of capital. But they're also not just getting bigger, they're going broader. They've launched a whole separate brand just for the luxury market, and they've gone international with it right out of the gate in places like London and Toronto.
And this is the part I find really interesting. With their new luxury brand, they're zigging where everyone else zags. Most big brands franchise their international spots. LPT is opening company-owned offices. That gives them way more control and shows they're serious about building a real, long-term global brand.
So when you put it all together, the platform model, the clever pay structure, the cash-free acquisitions, it leads to one massive question. LPT didn't just play the game better, they kind of rewrote the entire rulebook. The big question now is, did they just build a successful company, or did they create the blueprint for what all brokerages will look like in the future? The whole industry is definitely paying attention. Thanks for tuning in.